spring, summer, or fall. All you have to do is call.
In 1993, the Victorian State government, led by Jeff Kennett, first corporatised, then sold the SEC.
From my recollection of those times, there wasn't much of a stink about the privatisation of the electricity industry in Victoria, no. They changed the name by splitting up the SEC, so, you know, as far as a lot of Victorians would have assumed, they never sold the SEC. It wasn't until years later they started to recognise that, well, geez, these people used to supply me power and now these people supply me power.
So that was around about the time where it was split up, and there were 6 companies back then that we had members in.
When the SEC was corporatised, the public was told that the breakup of the SEC monopoly would result in a competitive market that would deliver better service to customers at cheaper rates.
Those 6 companies were meant to compete with each other for all sorts of efficiencies, really. And this would be the government's view of the world. And over the years, those 6 companies have merged and consolidated.
There are currently 3 distribution companies, SP AusNet, Gemina and City Power and Powercor. Combined, they have an estimated $4.9 billion in sales revenue, profit before tax of $650 million and after-tax combined profit of $640 million.
Obviously, who owns Singapore Power? Well, there's obviously a link there to the Singapore government, and the same would go for Powercor. In terms of them, last time I checked it was China Light and Power that had an involvement there. So, I mean, because they own the assets, obviously profits wouldn't stay local, they would go overseas.
Through a web of holding and infrastructure companies, Victoria has effectively been carved in two, with transmission and distribution of electricity going to the giant Hong Kong-based multinational Chong Kong infrastructure in the west, and the Singapore government through Temasek Holdings in the east.
The competition that was talked about when privatisation occurred doesn't exist. It is not there. The consumer is not going to get a benefit out of having privatisation occur in the power industry, because private companies are in the business of making money and they try and make as much money as they can in order to appease the shareholders or a government.
The 3 distribution companies employ more than 5,300 workers. This year, the companies made an after-tax profit estimated between $51,000 and $168,000 per employee. In 2011, SP AusNet had a retained profit of $655.6 million. That's $437,000 per employee. They can afford to pay their workers very good wages and conditions. The ETU needs to maximise resources in negotiating good wages and conditions. We are aiming for common EBA completion dates for all power industry ETU members. Organiser Wes Hayes oversaw the finalisation of the EBA for SP AusNet and Gemina last year, and Greg Arnett is currently overseeing negotiations with City Power and Powercor. The rest of the industry is controlled by smaller power contracting companies that tender for jobs from the distribution companies. These contractors now make up half of Victoria's power industry workforce.
So the union needs to respond to that, and we need to give you the resources and support like we've never done before. We made a deliberate decision to man up in the power industry contracting area.
Peter McKinnon was brought in 2 years ago to organise this growing area of the industry.
It was the first real good look I'd had at the power industry contractors' agreements. I'd worked with the power industry contractors for a number of years when I was working with Gemina, and basically took for granted that they were on the same terms and conditions as us.
The reality is that members working for power industry contractors are on far less wages and conditions than those working for distribution companies. The agreements covering DBs are very closely aligned to that enjoyed by electrical contracting members, which is arguably the best in the country. The union is pushing for parity across the entire power industry.
The argument I ran was basically, you've got 2 blokes working on a pole, one working on one pole, one working on another, on 2 vastly different awards and conditions, doing exactly the same job and exactly the same scenario. All we want is parity.
Through extensive negotiations and support from the members in the power contracting industry, Peter McKinnon is confident they'll get what they want.
We're at a point now where we're only apart on 2 issues. The expiry date we managed to achieve, the all overtime at double time we also managed to achieve, the inclement weather payment we achieved, The pay outcomes will bring us not only in line but slightly above what the distribution companies pay. And yeah, basically the only two things we're apart is 10% super, which the DBs have enjoyed for almost 10 years, and a contractor's clause. There's not much point doing an EBA when a company can go out and contract in a contractor that's paying less terms and conditions that undermine and undercut the terms and conditions and job security of our guys.
Although the EBA for City Power and Powercor is closely aligned to the electrical contracting agreement, there are a number of claims the union is still working on to match SP AusNet and Gemine's EBA.
We've had an industrial campaign going for about, probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe. What we've been doing is taking the last 4 hours of a shift off on an irregular basis, if you like, banning overtime for that day. Our advice to the company is that we're very, very close. If you take the GPS component of the field mobile computing solution off the table in these negotiations, we're very, very close to agreement. We have issues all the same with some contractors' clauses that we're seeking. And of course they have issues with the amount of money that they're prepared to offer us. So those three things basically are the crux of it.
The size and motivation for profit of the corporate employers determines that members need to stand united to achieve decent wages and conditions. The 3 power industry EBAs will be more closely aligned by the end of negotiations, and common completion dates at the end of August 2013 will help us to maintain parity in the next agreement.
At the end of the day, for all our members, what we look for is obviously having the best agreement in this industry and make all those conditions relevant and updated, and paying the best rates of pay and having the best income protection. And regardless of whether you're a contractor or a distribution business, we want those same entitlements across the board.